Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and today I'm coming to you with the news of the past 24 hours, which covers day 11 of the war in Ukraine. So today we're going to be taking this a little bit of a different route. Instead of focusing on the front lines in Ukraine, it appears that economic sanctions inside of the Russian Federation are taking their toll as strain on the political system of Russia is starting to show. After that, we will of course go to our usual schedule of going over the Kiev area, the Sumy and Kharkiv area, and then we will finish up in the southern front near Crimea. Starting off in St. Petersburg today, there have been an incredible amount of interesting developments. I would like to point out these clashes first because this was very interesting to watch. But anyways, I won't say much about it. I'll just let y'all see it and, think what you want for yourselves. Okay, so before I let y'all see the rest of this video, something funny is about to happen here, and I just have to say this because it was hilarious to watch. This guy kind of telegraphed his punch way in advance, and, I'm not really a fan of the Russian government or anything, but this cop dodged the punch perfectly, and so I just want y'all to note that before this play. So now I'll let y'all see the whole video uninterrupted. What's really interesting to me about this entire confrontation is that unlike American riot police, they seem to be somewhat disorganized because there's only two of them on that street, and there was a decent amount of protesters, if you want to call them that, although they don't really look like violent protesters. There was about at least several dozen of them, and yet there was only two cops on the film, which was interesting to me. Anyways, moving on from that, we can see that there has been a huge protest in St. Petersburg, kind of jumping from that into the big picture of what's going on in St. Petersburg. There's been a huge protest today. I'll show you all that. Now I'll cut that video a little bit short because it's just them chanting no war throughout the entire video, but you can see that the actual scale of the protest is rather large. We don't actually have any specific numbers on that protest at the moment, but it does look like it's at least several hundred people, if not thousands. But I'm not really sure. That's really speculation on my part because I can't confirm any of those numbers based off of what we can see in the video. Moving on from that, it appears that the amount of riot police that are active within the city of Moscow has increased heavily because, as we can see in this video, they are practically marching around like they're in a military parade, which tells me this. This is all based off of assumptions here, so take this with a grain of salt because this is just my opinion. But when you have riot police out in force, it's suggesting that the government is getting a little uneasy and they're thinking that there may be large civil unrest due to the sanctions and the war, or a combination of both. Nonetheless, I'll just show y'all the video to let y'all see the extent of the amount of riot police they have in a single area in this video.
Moscow here, outside the Bolshoi, and I just want to show you the sheer amount of force that's been put out onto the streets. There are riot police, military police, local Moscow police, absolutely everywhere. I mean, look at this column that's coming past me here. And all around us there are armoured trucks. I mean, this is the pavilion in front of the Bolshoi, obviously a huge symbol of Russia's extraordinary history and culture, and this is a symbol of modern Russia, I think. And what's also extraordinary is that all around me here, there's more people being arrested, taken off in trucks, all around me here are these huge groups of people, mostly young people, who are just walking. They're just circulating in this square. They're not doing anything, they're not shouting, they're not screaming. but they just want to make themselves known. And the only way I can really describe it is it's almost like these are shoals of fish and these are sharks. And
so I'm going to cut this video short because it's just him kind of giving a monologue on the situation. But one thing that I'm really starting to see, like the picture is starting to come together in Russia, and this is why I haven't been talking about riots or protests around the world about the situation in Ukraine at all until today. And that's because a picture is starting to form in Russia that makes it appear that the government may be in a bit of peril or danger, at least in their minds, from the public, because the amount of riot police and the amount of arrests that they are conducting on film, I didn't include all the film, I just included the hallmark pieces that would be worthy of watching. But the amount of arrests they're conducting on citizens suggests that there's apparently a large amount of Russians who do not support the war, and they're trying to crack down on them immediately to make them, you know, not be as openly hostile against the war. But I don't believe that's going to work anymore because, as you all know, economic sanctions have been impacting Russia for the past several days, about a week at this point, and it appears that that is now starting to be felt across Russia as well, as in this provincial town of Nizhnekamsk, I believe is the correct pronunciation. We can see a very interesting scene that a government would fear. These workers inside of this mill have not been paid. And when workers are not paid, especially the average labor, not that there's anything wrong with the average labor, but they are a tough breed of people, they will get hostile. And as we can see in this video, it appears that they're starting to get riled up. I'll just show y'all the film and let y'all see for yourselves. But as you can see, because the rest of the video is just him running up some stairs, as you can see, there's a large amount of workers striking, and the reason they're striking is because they haven't been paid because the ruble has collapsed so badly that the company bosses of that mill have refused to pay the workers. And so I'm sure that while we only have a video of this one incident happening, this is starting to happen across the entirety of the country. And if that begins to happen, there will definitely be a regime change, most likely. You know, whether the government goes out swinging or not on these people is another question. But the fact that you have people who are not being affected economically protesting against the war, and now you're having people who are going to go on strike and maybe even start posing some riots around the country in response to the sanctions and them not being paid due to the economy practically collapsing, you're going to start seeing that it will be inevitable, because this is pretty much the same things that led to Argentina and the Falklands War having their government overthrown. You're going to start seeing it head in that direction, most likely, is what I'm assuming. But then again, that's speculation on my part. The Russians may shoot those workers and force them to go back to work. They'll keep on arresting the somewhat peaceful, well, the very peaceful protesters in Moscow and St. Petersburg and most of the other major cities in Russia. So maybe nothing will happen, but if the situation does get dire enough, these people will become violent and they'll start lashing out against the Russian government. So I believe that we will start to see massive civil unrest in Russia within the coming weeks, most likely. Anyways, finally moving on to the Frontline news that everyone looks forward to every day. The Frontline news is incredibly important. I know that we have some Ukrainians in the chat. Some of them are currently in Ukraine at the moment. I wish you all the best of luck, and so for that, I'll get straight to the Frontline news. And at the moment, I had to include this because we've gotten no hardcore pictures or news anymore about the 40-mile-long convoy, but the 40-mile-long convoy is still sitting on the road after 4 days of not moving. That is leading most Western analysts to suggest that the supply lines in the Kiev area have completely collapsed and they're not able to resupply this convoy, or they decided to leave the convoy there since the supply lines are so stretched, and they're supplying other units that are closer to the front lines around Bucha and Irpin and Kiev. And so what this is kind of suggesting is it's kind of backing up that claim I made last night's stream and the night before that the logistics are terrible, and there's math to back that up. If y'all would like to look at that, I will be uploading this logistics map later on, and you can also find a post on the Ukraine invasion videos Reddit, where I wrote up a whole entire essay on this logistical issue that they're probably running into. But at the moment, it looks like it's very dire up near Kiev, and it looks like the Russians have severely hindered their advances or any of their battle plans due to this convoy being there if they are actually trying to still supply it at this time. So moving on from that, we're going to move down to the area of the Hostomel Bucha urban area. And I have to mention, because a lot of people are saying that the markers are off, the markers are based off of the location that I get with the video. And so if it says Hostomel, the marker goes in Hostomel. But it appears that a lot of the people who are posting this stuff are actually getting even their own towns mixed up. So so while this marker is in Hostomel, it may actually be in Bucha or Irpin, but it's in this general area. So moving on from that, we can see that there's been some damage in Hostomel today. Several buildings have, of course, been destroyed. There's a fire, and I'll just show you all the video and let y'all see for yourselves.
Ребят, дайте помощь, пожалуйста. Гостомель, чешский двор. У нас тут все горит. Все обваливается. Некуда женщин и детей прятать. Подвалы, которые были, попробивало двери. Дома обваливаются, рушатся. Пришлите какую-то помощь, чтобы забрали детей и женщин.
So as you can see, there's been some buildings damaged around the area. We can see that there was pot marks of gunfire on the other walls of the buildings, which suggests that that area must have been in contention by the Ukrainians. So that being said, I don't know if this front line here that I've drawn up on this in this red field is going to move back towards Hostomel, because there is information that the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians out of Bucha completely, and they're somewhere in between Hostomel, or they may have even pushed them back behind Hostomel now. But I haven't gotten any information to confirm that to move this front line, and so at the moment, the front line will stay stationary on the map. Now, in the area of Irpin, we've seen even more destroyed houses. As it appears that the fighting is stalled, there hasn't been any video evidence of fighting within the area of Hostomel, Bucha, Irpin. So that being said, I can't really confirm that there's still ongoing heavy fighting there, but we can confirm that there's a large amount of damage to the residential buildings. Nonetheless, I'll just show you all the video. Also, that's the remains of what was a car. You can see the tires down there.
Это лес, что происходит.
You know, it's really terrible to look at the destruction that a war brings. It's really inevitable destruction in a war. That's what war is. But it's really sad to look at it and think that, you know, there are families that have been uprooted from these areas and they're having to go elsewhere. And you know, I have a lot of sympathy for them. We know that there will probably be around 1.4 million Ukrainian refugees crossing the Ukrainian border westward in the coming week. It'll probably surpass that point. And it's just very unfortunate to look at where they once lived and it was perfectly fine and normal and peaceful. And now they're, you know, of course, having to run from a war zone. So very terrible news, and I hate that. But anyways, we're now going to move on to the news in the Kiev area. We can see that they had a marriage under fire today. I'll just show you all the video. It's very sweet. They're doing it near a combat zone. It's just a really interesting thing to watch. I'll just let y'all see it.
Спаси, Христе Боже, спаси, Христе Боже, на многая літа, многая літа, многая літа.
You know what's funny to me? I know that this is a serious situation, but it is funny that they're having a wedding in the middle of the war. But one thing I was wondering is that now that they're married, are they going to fight about whose responsibility it is to fight the Russians? Like, is someone are they going to take breaks or something? Who knows? But anyways, moving on from that, we can see that there has been some AA units deployed in Kiev. The location of where they exactly are is unknown, so this was uploaded because it's not giving away their positions due to the kind of anonymity of the background. It's nothing but the sky. But I'll show y'all. It's kind of reminiscent of what we see in Syria, as they have the 23mm Gush gun equipped on the back of a flatbed truck. Whatever works, as they say, and so I'm sure that it's actually a pretty solid thing to use. It's just that it reminds me so much of all the videos we used to see coming out during the Arab Spring back in 2012. So, that being said, all we know is that they're now using kind of more like technical style AA vehicles. And that's pretty much it. Moving on from that, I'm going to let y'all see the entire address that Zelenskyy gave today on March 6th. There are subtitles, so there is a translation for all of the English speakers. So anyways, I'll just let y'all see the address. It practically speaks for itself. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Correction. That's actually the next video. This one is actually President Zelenskyy talking with Elon Musk today. That was really weird to me. But anyways, I'll let y'all watch it because it was bizarre. It was a really weird thing to see.
Jumps like you. So if you have time after the war, you're very welcome. I invite you. Yes.
That sounds good. Well, I look forward to visiting once things are.
So it was a very short snippet, but that was really bizarre. I didn't actually expect Elon Musk to be speaking to President Zelenskyy at any time, but nonetheless it happened, and that was just odd. So now I'll finally move on to the address from President Zelenskyy, and I'm just going to let it run in its entirety because he had a lot of interesting things to say today, and it's worthy of being seen. So without further ado, let me just get straight to the video.
Українські народи. Розпочну зі слів підтримки, які я чую від наших партнерів, від наших друзів. Дуже важливих слів. Слів підтримки, підкріплених конкретними кроками. Щодня і щоночі я розмовляю з лідерами багатьох держав, з лідерами бізнес-спільнот. Протягом усіх днів війни майже немає такої години, щоб Україна не чула, яку допомогу отримує. Вночі знов говорив про це з президентом Байденом. Я вдячний йому за рішучість, за підготовку ще нових рішень для українців та для європейців, ще нових санкцій проти агресії. А перед тим говорив з американськими конгресменами, сенаторами, більше 200 людей, дуже щирі, максимально зацікавлені в тому, щоб реально нам допомогти. Конкретні розмови, які примножують нашу впевненість, бо на чиєму боці світ, той ніколи не впаде у темряві. Світ має силу, щоб закрити наше небо для російських ракет, для російських бойових літаків, гвинтокрилів. Якщо хтось все ще сумнівається, то Україні потрібні літаки. Насправді це просто, коли маєш волю, щоб зробити небо безпечним, небо України, небо Європи. Говорив з прем'єр-міністром Австралії. І я вдячний австралійцям за моральну позицію по відношенню до російського експорту. Не повинно бути жодного порту, в якому держава-терорист може заробляти гроші. Прем'єр-міністри Албанії, Болгарії, Ізраїлю. Підтримка для України. Надихаюча розмова з Ілоном Маском, з людиною, яка робить ракети для майбутнього, а не вбиває ракетами заради минулого. Ми говорили про те, як перемагати зараз, про те, як будемо працювати потім, після перемоги. Підтримка для України від глобального бізнесу, від лідерів найбільш передових компаній не менш важлива, ніж підтримка від провідних держав світу. Коли корпоративний світ з тобою і не боїться, ти маєш подвійний захист, потрійну зброю, ти маєш майбутнє. Українці, ми вже вибороли наше майбутнє, але ще боремось за наше сьогодні. Це дуже важливо. Воюємо за те, де пройде кордон між життям і рабством. І це не тільки наш выбор. Граждане Российской Федерации делают точно такой же выбор прямо сейчас. В эти дни, в эти часы, между жизнью и рабством. Сегодня, завтра, в ближайшую неделю. Это время, когда еще можно победить зло без невосполнимых потерь. Когда за позицию грозят увольнением или автозаком, а не гулагом. материальными потерями, а не расстрелом. Не упустите эту возможность. Социальные сети, друзья, знакомые и незнакомые, коллеги и родственники вас должны услышать. Мы, украинцы, мы хотим мира. Граждане России, для вас это борьба не только за мир в Украине. Это борьба и за вашу страну, за то лучшее, что в ней было, за свободу, которую вы видели, за достаток, который вы чувствовали. Если вы промолчите сейчас, то за вас потом будут говорить только ваша бедность, а отвечать ей будут только репрессии. Не молчите. Заговорили російські військові, яких взяли у полон наші захисники. Сотні полонених, серед них і пілоти літаків, які бомбили наші міста, наших мирних людей. Ми почули їхні свідчення. Ми побачили документи, мапи, плани не вчорашнього дня. Це не імпровізація, це війна. Вони готували це вторгнення саме так, жорстоко, цинічно, завідомо з порушенням правил війни. Тому Харків, тому Чернігів, тому Суми, тому Маріуполь і багато інших українських міст-героїв побачили чисте зло, звірство. Так було заплановано. Але це не вб'є нашу людяність, не вб'є нас. Попри все, ми поводимося з полоненими в рамках Женевської конвенції. Попри все, наші ракети у відповідь не падають на цивільні об'єкти Росії або Білорусі. Звідки на нашу територію щодня йдуть ракети, йдуть колони техніки, летить авіація. Проти мирних людей, проти мирних міст. Житомир, Коростень, Овруч, передмістя Києва, міста на півдні. Вони готуються бомбардувати Одесу. Одесу. Росіяни завжди приїжджали в Одесу. Завжди відчували в Одесі тільки тепло, тільки щирість. А що тепер? Бомби проти Одеси, артилерія проти Одеси, ракети проти Одеси. Це буде воєнний злочин, це буде історичний злочин. Українці, ми боремось вже 11 днів за свободу, за нашу державу. Ми вистояли, ми вже розуміємо, як будемо відновлювати нашу країну. Ми вже формуємо спеціальні фонди для відбудови України. Їх вже 4. Фонд відновлення зруйнованого майна та інфраструктури України. Фонд відновлення та трансформації нашої економіки. Фонд обслуговування та погашення державного боргу. Фонд підтримки малого та середнього бізнесу. І ще багато програм для підтримки наших людей, героїв, які борються за нашу державу. І це тільки початок. Зараз ще потрібні сили, потрібна мудрість. Потрібна воля, потрібна перемога, потрібен мир. Мир, щоб зберегти Україну. Слава Україні!
As you can see, the president's speech covered a lot, but it did cover a lot of interesting things. For example, today, he's actually showing a much more optimistic tone to the Western response to the invasion than he has in prior days. And I know I haven't shown these on stream, but I did find it interesting that he's showing a more optimistic tone today towards the support the West is giving, which suggests that he maybe heard some things that we did not hear when he was talking to the congressman and the president of the U.S. Earlier yesterday. Usually, around the time the stream is ending, the sun is rising in Ukraine, and he gives a speech. So sadly, I can't give the one he's giving for day 12, but I can give the one that he made for day 11. So moving on from that, we're going to move on to the area of Chernihiv, and before we get to all the location unknown markers we have today, I'll answer some questions in between. So finally, at Chernihiv today, we've seen that there was a abandoned tour near Chernihiv. It appears to have been bogged down in the mud in the Rasputitsa, and so I'll just show y'all the video and let y'all see it for yourselves.
Трошки не добіг. Біг, бля, підарасиків не добіг. Ну що, Іван Іванович? Я думаю, цього ми можемо живити, нехуй делать.
As you can see, though, it was stuck in the Rasputitsa. Up there around Chernihiv, the Chernihiv and Kharkiv area, not Kharkiv area, I'm sorry, the Kiev area. It's Rasputitsa season. If y'all are new to the stream, y'all don't know what Rasputitsa is, it's pretty much like the seasonal mud that comes in the spring, well, like really near like the end of winter and the beginning of spring and in the fall, where the ground in some parts of Eastern Europe becomes like this weird slushy, like boggy stuff. And it's like impossible to move vehicles of any kind through it. And so, usually offensives in the eastern area of Europe have to kind of operate around this Rasputitsa, so that way the tanks, if you're using it like an armored warfare kind of doctrine, do not get bogged down in that mud. But it appears, and this is why I'm saying, this is why I keep on saying that the Russians weren't expecting this kind of resistance and now things are falling apart for them, is because they didn't consider the Rasputitsa when invading the country, and their first day objectives like landing paratroopers at Hostomel, only 200 of them with no support, was suggestive that they were planning for this country to collapse within a day or 32 hours, somewhere in between there, so that way they could really roll in with no resistance and they wouldn't even have to worry about Rasputitsa, because there would be no firefighting involved for them to really have to consider that. And so that's why I keep on saying, keep on insisting that the Russian plan is kind of falling apart, and I don't really think they expected to be fighting for this long in Ukraine. Anyways, moving on to the rest of the news in Chernihiv today, we can see that the anthem of Ukraine was played by a military band in Chernihiv. I'll let you all watch that. It's really inspiring and stirring. It's really neat, too, that they're actually playing in the middle of a war zone. So I find that to be a big boost to morale probably in the area. Nonetheless, here's the video. Anyways, I'll cut it short there because I bet you I'll get the picture that they were playing the anthem in the war zone. And that's very neat to me. Because, for one thing, you would never think that modern warfare would actually have military bands anywhere near the front line. But apparently Ukraine has managed to put one together. It doesn't really look like they're like a military band that just rolled up out of Kiev and, you know, they're in their nice dress uniforms playing these instruments. They actually look like they just came off the front line, slung the rifles over their shoulders, and then grabbed some instruments and started playing. So that was really neat to me. And finally, the last bit of news we have in Chernihiv is that one of the bombs that we saw from the aircraft yesterday actually landed in the bedroom of this house. And it was a really odd picture, because you just have this egg-shaped bomb just sitting in the middle of this destroyed bedroom. As far as I know, no one was in the house and no one was harmed when the bombs kind of just fell into them. So that was very fortunate that no one was in the house. So, you know, I guess we can kind of look at this without feeling any sorrow, and we can just look at it as an oddity, as like such a weird thing that this bomb, this unexploded bomb, a 500-pound, well, I'm sorry, a 500-kilogram bomb, is just sitting there. That was really weird to me. So anyways, moving on from that, I'm going to start answering questions now before I move on to the location unknown markers, which we have a load of today. So what do we got? Ooh, wow, the chat. Wow, dang, the chat's blowing up. I'm going to try and answer as many of them as I can, but this is going so fast I don't think I can. We're probably going to have to start promoting more mods after this. Let's see. Wow, I'm late. Good evening, everyone. How do you do? How do you do? How are you doing? Basically, the whole world hates Russia right now. Yeah, and I mean, like, considering that the companies are making kind of like emotional responses to the people right now around the world, and they're just withdrawing all of their business from Russia, that says a lot. How about we talk about Ukraine, since they're the one in the war, not... I don't really talk about American politics in here, you see. It's not that I'm afraid to talk about it, it's just that this is really about the Ukrainian war. So I think you're agreeing with me there when we were saying that we're going to talk about the war instead of American politics, with the Ukraine war as a sideshow. So anyways, moving on from that, expert says Putin has 2 weeks left of war finance. If he does, that's really interesting. And from the looks of it, it looks like the Ukrainians could probably hold him for that time. And I have to remind everyone again that something very similar happened in Finland in 1939 called the Winter War. And the Finnish were heavily outnumbered. The Russians, the Soviets, I mean, at the time, had thousands of tanks and thousands of planes. And the Finnish had like 30 tanks. I think they had exactly 30 tanks. And they had like, I believe like 40 or 50 planes. And they were heavily outnumbered too. Like the Russians outnumbered them 2-1. Yet the Finnish held them off and actually fought back against them very well, to the point that the Russians pretty much had to peace out of the war because they couldn't sustain the warfare anymore, if you know what I'm saying. So that being said, I believe that Ukraine has hope as a modern day kind of winter war, although it's happening more towards the spring. Nonetheless, I think the point still stands because they got a lot of things going for them. First off, the weather's been in their favor. Tomorrow, I'm going to try and include that. Today was incredibly busy, y'all, and I'm terribly sorry about that. So that being said, the weather will be included in tomorrow's stream, most likely, because I would like to cover the areas that have Rasputitsa, snow. I was looking at the weather map beforehand, and it appears that there is a large snowstorm passing over Hungary and Romania, and it's going to pass over the whole of Ukraine, mostly the southern area of Ukraine for sure. It's going to pass over Crimea and Mykolaiv and Kherson and the Zaporizhia area. So we know that this area will probably be covered in snow, and now it will start suffering from Rasputitsa as that snow melts in the coming days, because it looks like the temperature will heat that up, and it will start melting the snow, which will create the inevitable Rasputitsa that we're seeing in the north. But we do know the Kharkiv area right now is covered in snow. The Kiev area doesn't really look so much like that. It really just looks like they're suffering from a lot of Rasputitsa in the area, which is a huge hindrance for the Russian armed forces because they can't operate their armor the way it should be operated because they have to stay to the roads. And if they get off the roads, the traction that the tanks can get in the mud is incredibly poor, and so they get bogged down, and then they just have to be abandoned most times. So anyways, moving on from that question, let's see. What's that guitar? I think that's in the chat. Hope my man lives. If y'all are talking about Pavel, who's probably still... Yep, he's here. He's here. Welcome back, Pavel. Pavel is our friendly Ukrainian volunteer, and he's currently fighting somewhere in the area of Kiev, although I don't want him to say where, and hopefully he does not. But we wish him the best of luck here. He's been here since the first days at this point, and he's been giving us some tidbit updates here and there, and I'm just very glad that he's still getting on these streams and viewing them. So I thank you very much for still being here, Pavel. Let's see. Is that Eastern Orthodox? If you're talking about the wedding, I think this was around the point of the wedding. Yes, most Ukrainians are Eastern Orthodox. I saw a major news channel today. I will name them because I don't really like mainstream news. It was CNN, and they called Eastern Orthodoxy Russian Orthodoxy. And they were trying to make the similarity that Ukrainians are really just Russians that are in another country, because they actually practice Russian Orthodoxy, and they didn't call it Eastern Orthodoxy, which is what it's actually called. And so that was kind of a little ignorant and ill-informed on their part, but we'll leave that alone for now, and we'll just move on. So sad how USA, Great Britain, Russia make deal with Ukraine to give their nuclear arms so they not be fire on or war with Ukraine. Now they are being attacked. Yes, that's true. There was a treaty in 1994 that Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States signed with Ukraine, saying that if they handed over their nuclear weapons that they had inherited from the collapsed Soviet Union, because they had, I believe, at least more than 1,000 inside of Ukraine, and they were told if they gave them up, they would be guaranteed their sovereignty by the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And as we can see now, that has not carried over at all because Russia is currently trying to invade them, and we don't see the United States or the United Kingdom doing anything to defend them. So in terms of that treaty, it's been violated by all parties involved that gave assurances to Ukraine. So that being said, that's not really good for them. And to that degree, I can see why some Ukrainians would be bitter against the West as well, even though we are helping them, because we did violate a treaty where we directly stated that we would stand up for them and protect their sovereignty from any country as long as they gave up their nuclear weapons. And they held up their end of the bargain, yet here we are not holding up our end of the bargain / treaty, if you know what I'm saying. So that's really interesting to me. moving on from that, that is one badass looking priest. I would not mess with that guy. Oh, I wouldn't either. I mean, like, really, all of them look badass. They all look really cool, and I'm very glad that they got married. They looked like they were going to be pretty happy together. The dude, though, looked like he was more focused on fighting than getting married, so maybe that was the wishes of the wife. But regardless, I wish him a happy marriage, and I hope they are, alive and well at the end of the war, and they can help rebuild Ukraine. So interesting. I consider myself a I don't really cover politics. I'm sorry. I don't cover American party politics, at least. So I'm sorry to everyone who's here wanting to get kind of like a take on that, because I try and focus more so on the war than party politics, because party politics always starts dragging this stuff into being a soapbox for the American political parties. So once again, I'm sorry about that. Let's see. Ukraine has just been doming a shit ton of aircraft out of the sky recently. Yes, they have. They've been shooting down a large amount of them. Usually it's from ground fire, which is the most interesting thing to me. But it's not really that interesting, because when you really look at the size of their air force, it's incredibly small. And obviously the Ukrainian air force can't be everywhere doing everything. So, considering the ground fire shooting them down, I guess that's not really surprising, but it is impressive, the sheer volume of aircraft they're shooting down. And they're even saying right now, Western analysts at least are saying that the Russians aren't deploying their entire air force, and they're not operating them at full capacity. And I believe it's because they're looking at these terrible losses, and they can't really rebuild aircraft as easy as they can, buy more trucks or something like that. And they're looking at this and they're going, it's like, it's too big of a risk, really, to send in the entire Air Force and use them all at once, because they could get shot down in high volumes, and it's going to be very hard to account for that attrition as opposed to ground force attrition. So moving on from that, we're going to skip down a little bit, because there's been a lot of chats. I believe this thing's going 1,000 miles an hour, so I'm going to try and move down to some of the other points. Let's see. Putin is a bloody dictator that'll be captured one day. I don't think he'll be captured, per se, by the Ukrainians, but if things go south like I was saying earlier they were, he may be captured by the kind of like interim Russian government that may be set up when they overthrow him or something. I don't know. And, when I say they're going to overthrow him, that's not really anything I'm saying with certainty. That's just kind of my assumption due to how this is going. And so, I don't know. It could go either way. He may stay in power, and he may put the iron fist down on everyone living in Russia and nothing happens, or it may get out of control even if he does that, because he's already doing that, and then he has to start looking at fleeing the country and going into exile. I don't know what country would take him, maybe Kazakhstan or Belarus, or he's going to get overthrown and captured and killed or something. Either way, I don't really see the situation in Russia being good for everyone at the same time. It's either going to be good for the people, or it's going to be good for the people in charge, if you see what I'm saying there. So I'm going to answer a few more questions. Elon Musk is using Ukraine as a beta test for his satellite internet. Legit, not a terrible idea, to be honest. I have to agree. I actually said that many days ago when I heard about it. I said that this product was never tested before, the Starlink system, and so he's using Ukraine as a great PR mechanism to make it look like he's really into the Ukrainian cause. But the truth is that he's just using this as a good excuse to get out some beta testing and some incredible PR, which is a smart move on his part. But once you really look through it, it is kind of a little questionable that you would be using a war and people suffering to kind of promote a new product to people. But, regardless of that, I'm just going to leave that there, because there's not really much to add to it. Elon Musk is using Ukraine. Oh, I've already read that. Putin is the bad guy. The bad guy never wins. The world makes sure if his time is running out. Yeah, that's true. They are looking at making his time running out with the sanctions. And honestly, everyone kind of scoffed at the sanctions at the beginning, including me, because I didn't really think they'd be doing much. But now that we've seen the sanctions really start taking effect, they're doing a lot. And they're doing a lot more than I thought they would. So to that degree, that's fairly good. And if Ukraine can hold on, I believe the economic turmoil in Russia may end the war sooner than the ground war will end the war, if you see what I'm saying there. Because while the Russians are suffering logistically, I think they're going to be pretty pig-headed in trying to keep this thing going as long as possible, even if it doesn't make sense. And so I believe the economic turmoil and the riots that will probably start happening at home due to people's finances being destroyed and they're not being paid or anything will probably pave the way for a new government, in a way. But that's just my opinion on my part. So don't take that for, like, don't quote me on it. Just kind of like you know, take it for what you will. It's just really my opinion. So anyways, moving on from that, hopefully I don't touch that. Oh, it's not going that. Okay, good. I can answer these. Moscow will build factories there when it's over. Maybe. Ukraine turned their nuclear weapons into Russia, not US and UK. Well, I know they didn't hand them over to the US, UK. I thought they just had them all deactivated. I thought they didn't hand them over to anybody. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's at least what my standpoint was on that treaty. Putin's own people are against him. They also had enough of being used. Maybe. I mean, we'll have to see in the coming days if that's true, but maybe. That might be true. A country with the second largest army and resources is being overpowered by civilians. LOL. This is a joke. Yeah, but I mean, it's not really that much of a joke, you know, when you really think about it, because if you look at Vietnam in the United States and you look at Afghanistan in the United States, you can start to see that large countries can kind of just lose interest due to how long and how costly wars are and just kind of abandon them. You know, kind of like really anywhere. I mean, like even the Soviets in Afghanistan ran into the same problem. And, you know, the Soviets in Finland ran into the same problem. Really, every country's run into that problem at some point. And I believe that that's what they're going to be running into here as well, is that this war is eventually just going to cost more than it actually benefits. And then they will just end this stuff. So, that being said, we're finally going to move on to all the location unknown markers. And first off, we're going to see that a abandoned tor was destroyed. I believe this may have been the one in Chernihiv, but it didn't have a location on it, so it got put under the location unknown. Nope, this is a totally different one.
Ну це глушилка, сука. Ми підпалили, блядь. А заглушить, блядь, я таку хуйню не знаю, блядь. Вона на пузі одна перейшла, блядь. А увіряли, що вона не перейде, блядь. От, блядь. Документацію дивіться, документацію.
You know what's weird to me is that one didn't even look bogged down. It just looked like it had been abandoned. So I wonder what happened with that one. Because it definitely wasn't the one in Chernihiv. The one in Chernihiv was like in a mud pit. But that one was on like perfectly fine grass and it just stopped. I guess maybe it ran out of gas. I'm not really sure though. It looked like it was kind of running in the video, but I couldn't really tell. So we're going to move on from that, and we can see that the Ukrainians found abandoned Russian vehicles in the night. The location is unknown, but we know that the Territorial Defense Unit came up upon some abandoned equipment in the middle of the night in an unknown location. I'll just let y'all watch the video and see it for yourselves.
Миротворці. Оце наші миротворці їхали до нас на такій техніці. І ми у них її забрали. Ось отакі миротворна техніка. Це те, що сьогодні ми у них забрали. О. І вон ще один. О. Даже два. Щоб у них такі техніки. Ось у нас.
As you can see, it's actually a pretty decent amount. It looks like 3 T-80s, a BMP-2, and a Amidst S SPG. So that's a fairly good pickup of loot, considering that it looks like it's all intact, hasn't been damaged, and it's probably in running condition. All they need is maybe gas. And they may even have gas in them, for all we know. But nonetheless, that's a very good find for the Ukrainians. I'm sure they'll start putting the equipment to use and mark it so that way it's known as a Ukrainian vehicle. Anyways, moving on from that, we can see a video of a Ukrainian using an RPG-7. I'll just show y'all the video. It speaks for itself.
Готовы? Выстрел. Давай, заряд, давай. Заряд. Заряд, быстрей. Другой достань. Сань, другой достань. Быстрей. Повторяем. Выстрел. Выстрел. Хватит. Меня захватит.
As you can see in that clip right there, it appears that they took out some kind of T-series tank. It looks like it may even be a T-80, which is really weird to me. I mean, like, regardless what kind of vehicle it is, even if it was a T-72B, that's really wild to me that an RPG-7 took out a T-72. From the front, it appears, because, you know, from the angle, it looks like it's slightly angled to the side, but not really enough to make the side a good shot. It looks like the front center glacis would still be the best shot. But that's really bizarre to me that they took out a Russian main battle tank with an RPG-7.
Город Киевская область, сожгли 2 танка нахуй. Давай.
Красавчики кортовці. Слава Україні. Героям слава. А так з кожним підором, блядь, буде нахуй.
Стань, чтобы тебя видно было на фоне желтого.
So anyways, moving on from that video, because now they're just going to pose for the trophy picture, we're going to move on to a rather touching video. I had to include this one because it was just so sweet. And, you know, we don't see a lot of sweet stuff in a war, but, you know, a dad came home to his kid, and this dad has been fighting on the front lines, and he has been able to get some leave of some kind and go back to his family, and you can see him greet his child, and it's just so touching because, you know, the child doesn't know what's going on and probably doesn't know that there's a war happening, and she just knows that her dad's been away for a while, and here he is back, and she just doesn't know that he came back from the front lines and could have died. But nonetheless, I'm going to let you all watch the video and see it for yourselves.
Там пришел, иди открывай дверь.
It's really touching, really. It's kind of sad because, you know, the conditions in a war are pretty tough, and, you know, everyone won't come home, and you hope that that guy comes home because he actually has a family and kids, and it, you know, humanizes the soldiers on the Ukrainian side to a good bit, and I'm sure that a lot of Russian soldiers also have families, but then again, we've seen them commit atrocities in some places, and so the sentiments with them aren't as strong, but with that Ukrainian man, I hope he makes it home at the end of the war. Anyways, moving on from that, we can see more pictures of abandoned vehicles. Apparently this post was deleted, so we will not be seeing those abandoned vehicles, but it was just another convoy of Russian abandoned vehicles. So, kind of run-of-the-mill stuff at this point. Moving on from that, we'll see some pictures of an ambushed convoy. The location was unknown, but it is a Russian convoy. I'll let you all see the video.
Базер. Минометка, блядь, там миномет, пацаны.
But anyways, as you can see, it's an abandoned Russian convoy. It appears to be one of the more lightly armored ones. It may have been the APC section of a BTG that was abandoned there, and they had some logistical vehicles around them, but nonetheless, they are abandoned vehicles. Moving on from that, we got some videos of an MLRS firing. I got multiple different locations for this today. I was told it was in Mariupol, Kiev, and Mykolaiv, so I couldn't really figure out which one was which, and so it just stayed in the location unknown section. Nonetheless, the video is really interesting because it's actually drone footage. So I'll just show it to y'all. Hopefully get this full screen. There we go. Anyways, that's pretty much the end of the video. The rest of the video is just it kind of like panning around the city. But it's really interesting. It's just odd to me. It's bizarre. You know, we live in the age of technology, and finally a war has kind of caught up to the technology available to people, and people are using drones and phones to record a lot of the goings-on in a war. And so for the first time, we actually get to see aerial footage of an MLRS firing in a war zone. And we've just never seen this kind of stuff. This kind of documentation is just unbelievable, really. It's bizarre that we have this much information that comes out every day and from such weird angles like that. And so I appreciate the people who actually spend the time during the war to film Russian locations, because one, they're telling the Ukrainians where they are, because they can probably geolocate it a lot better than I can, and two, it gives us a better picture of what's going on in the war. And so that's a really interesting aspect to me. So moving on from there, we finally see that the farmers are once again getting more tax-free equipment. I'll show you how the video. It's just a Russian using a John Deere tractor to pull away an APC.
Пацани, помахайте рукою!
I've got to say, it's just so cool to see so many military vehicles being pulled away by tractors in Ukraine. I think the Ukrainian farmers will probably be the fourth largest armored force in the world, behind the United States, Ukraine, and China, because Russia will probably lose, you know, and this is a joke, of course, but they'll probably lose most of their armored vehicles in this war, and the farmers will be the fourth most armed people in the world, and they'll have gotten it all tax-free, according to the Ministry of the Interior in Ukraine, because they've declared that spoils of war that the citizens are able to capture are theirs to keep, and they don't have to file taxes on them either, which is really neat to me. Anyways, we've seen some ingenuity on the Ukrainian side, as it appears that they started to print small 3D bombs, 3D printed bombs. I don't really know how large these are and what they're supposed to be used for. They look very small, actually. So I don't really know what they are and what they do, but we do know that they're 3D printing some kind of smaller sized bombs in Ukraine, which is really interesting to me, and hopefully I can get some more information on that. This has kind of piqued my curiosity, and maybe y'all's as well. So, moving on from that, we're finally going to move on to our last location unknown, and that's Russian losses. We don't know where these... Well, actually, I'm sorry, correction. This is actually a list of all the Russian losses that have been recorded with pictures, and you can go through this. This map is accessible to all of you watching the stream right now. You just have to join my Discord, link in the description below, and this map should be under the Useful Links tab as the Day 11 map. You can click on it there and download it and look at this, and you click on this link, and they have all the pictures of all the destroyed vehicles. Apparently there was a server error on that one. Unfortunate. Let me check this one. Okay, apparently there was a server error on that one. Maybe it's gone down. But when I first checked this, it actually had pictures of all the Russian vehicles, and you could see where they all were, and that each one of them was actually different. And so it actually gave you a number of all the destroyed, abandoned, and captured vehicles. And that was so cool to me, because this is a very extensive database of all the vehicles that they've lost. At least that we've seen in pictures. And so it gives you a very good idea of how many vehicles the Russians have confirmed lost. And then there may be more that haven't been filmed, recorded, or have evidence of their loss, yet they have been, and no one's just gotten around to seeing them yet. So that's really interesting to me. So moving on from that marker, we're finally going to move on to the area of Sumy. There's only been one development near the area of Sumy, and that's that there have been more destroyed vehicles near Sumy. I'll just show you all the pictures. They pretty much speak for themselves. As you can see, the Russians are still not having a good time around Sumy. As of now, the city has not fallen into Russian control, and it appears that the grip on Sumy by the Ukrainians is actually incredibly strong, and they can probably hold on to it for the rest of the war. But the actual condition of the fighting in the city, if there still is fighting in the city, is unknown, because it appears that the convoys that are getting destroyed further and further back, and we're not seeing any more evidence or proof of fighting inside of Sumy. So with that being said, we're going to move on to Kharkiv, because I don't really have any information to talk about the advances made down these two breakthrough convoys, because I haven't gotten any more information. On CNN today, they said that this breakthrough convoy has made it all the way to Novi Kiev, and that was odd to me, because there's been no actual recorded evidence of that, and so I don't really believe it, because my premise now is that if I can't see a video about it and actually prove it to be true based off of the video and the location given, it's not really something I can report on. And so while the Frontline may have changed to that degree, I haven't gotten any information to update the map, and so for the moment, this map will stay the way it is. So finally, moving on to Ukraine today, we've seen more captured equipment near Kharkiv, as we've seen most days. To show you all the video or the pictures. It is a video. I'll show you all the video.
символічно.
Символічна 200-та бригада. Прийшла і пішла далі 200-тись.
Вони кинули?
Так, кинули техніку, втікаючи під нашими обстрілами.
Скільки одиниць техніки?
Близько 30 одиниць. Танки, МТЛБ, КАМАЗи.
Цей танк можна теоретично взяти на українське озброєння?
Звичайно, звичайно. Т-80 БВМ.
But nonetheless, more captured vehicles on film, so we know that that's more confirmed Russian losses. Very interesting that the Ukrainians keep on, and it appears that they keep on capturing more vehicles than they're actually destroying, at least according to the videos. But then again, you know, those videos aren't actually completely representative of what's happening up there. But we are seeing a lot of them captured, and so I'm believing that if the Ukrainians are taking any losses in terms of armor, which we know they are, we've seen some video evidence of that, they're probably replenishing their losses with Russian captures at this point, because it seems like they're capturing more vehicles than they're losing. Although they probably lack trained crew to man those vehicles that are giving them a bit of a surplus. But nonetheless, it's good to know that they do have the vehicles needed to pretty much replenish what they started off with, as far as we know. So moving on into the actual city of Kharkiv, we can see today that there was a video of a missile hitting a Russian plane over Kharkiv, and it was very bright. So I'll just let y'all see it. Oh yeah, also let me explain a little bit more. This flash you see in the initial part of the video was the bombs that the aircraft had dropped. They had exploded, and then afterwards the aircraft got shot down. So now I'm going to let y'all see that with that context. So you can see that the plane turned into a literal fireball after the second missile hit the aircraft. I'm not sure if the pilot made it out alive. Either way, the aircraft did certainly go down after it dropped its bombs on the target somewhere in the northern area of the city. So moving on from that, we have more footage of the shot down plane. I'll show you all that right now.
Пиздец, ЗСУ, истребитель только что пизданули. Пизда.
It's wild to get multiple perspectives on a single event, because you can actually see what it looked like from multiple angles. Anyways, moving on from that, we can see that the TV tower, I believe that's what the aircraft was hitting. The TV tower was hit tonight in Kharkiv. So with that being said, we're not really sure if the television services and broadcasting ability is down in Kharkiv, but we do know that the TV tower was hit, and in Kiev, the TV service went down for a short while when the radio tower in that city was hit. So it may be the same for Kharkiv, but we don't have any information to confirm or deny that at the moment. So moving on to the eastern side of the city, we can see that a Ukrainian is cruising down the street with a man pad, and it's really interesting because he's got a lot of confidence, and I think he's on the prowl looking for a Russian aircraft to shoot down. Anyways, I'll let y'all see the video. What a guy. I mean, like, he really actually looks like he's just going on a very nice hunting trip down the middle of the city for an aircraft. And so I have to give him some kudos, because I don't really know if the Russians are still in the city anywhere, because, you know, at the beginning days, they actually started pushing inside the city down the major roadways, and I believe they got pushed out. But even if they haven't been, it's very brave of him to walk around the street on his own if he's near the outskirts, because what if the Russians did start to push back in and he's caught on his own? You know, either he'd have to surrender or he would get killed. So anyways, moving on from that, we can see that a building was hit in Kharkiv today. I'm going to show you all that real quick. And I'll go back so you can hear the audio. So we know it was a residential high-rise, some kind of apartment building, but we do not know if there were any civilian casualties. Unfortunately, most likely there were, as most civilian buildings are still occupied inside of Ukraine, so unfortunately there were probably civilian casualties. And, you know, you can add that to the list of Russian war crimes that they've been committing recently over the entirety of Ukraine, if that statement proves to be true in the future. And so finally, we can see more damage in Kharkiv. I'm going to show you this video, and just let y'all see it for yourselves. The damage is starting to become very extensive across all of the city.
Это пипец, это жесть. Вообще жопа.
So it's pretty wild that Kharkiv is starting to take a lot of damage, and I'm starting to get concerned as to where all of these civilians who are still stuck in the city will go, because a lot of the buildings are being destroyed, and almost every day we see more and more evidence of dozens of buildings being damaged to the point that they're unlivable, or they're going to be condemned due to them probably collapsing soon. And so I'm starting to wonder where these citizens will go soon. But that'll be a question that we'll have to figure out an answer to in the coming days as the Ukrainian response to that comes out. And I'm sure that they're not actually going to be forthcoming with that information, because they won't want these civilians. Well, actually, it'll probably be forthcoming. Come to think of it, I'll have to do a back take on that. It'll probably be forthcoming because they're not going to want the Russians to fire on the building. And if they do, they will want the world and the public to know that there were a large amount of civilians in the buildings that were hit. So wherever the civilians are going, I'm sure that'll be highly documented as to where they're being relocated if they survived that blast or they were not around and their residence was within there. And so before I move on to the southern area of the war, and then finally we're going to move on out towards Zhytomyr and the Venetia area, I'm going to answer some more questions. So Russia targeting nuclear power plants, so you do think if anything happened wrong. Nothing happened bad, if that's what you're asking about the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Nothing happened to it. It's still okay. It's under control. They fixed the situation. The fire started around a nuclear reactor that had been deactivated months ago for renovations and repairs. So fortunately, no damage was caused. You know, in terms of radiological damage to the environment, none of that was caused. So luckily, it wasn't anything that turned into something. Moving on from that, if Putin has massive support, why is he arresting and jailing people? Very good point. I brought that up earlier in the video. I believe that the government is starting to get afraid that the current administration is highly unpopular and that they may be looking to oust him soon, peacefully or violently. Soviet pilots flew against the Americans in Vietnam and Korea. No nuke wars happened then. Why can't the Americans just airstrike the Russians? Well, I think that's starting to simplify geopolitical issues to a high degree, because if you just commit airstrikes on Russia directly as the United States, that's a literal declaration of war right then. And unlike in Vietnam, where it was a proxy war where both sides knew they were kind of fighting each other, but they didn't actually state it on either side, if you airstrike Russia, that's a deliberate and clear attack, a direct attack on their country, and so it's a war. And so they would probably nuke us at that situation, and then it'd be mutually assured destruction after that. So I don't really think that would be a very smart call. NFKRZ is suffering. I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. I'm a very busy person, so I can't really watch YouTube a lot. I just get on here and, you know, run my own channel, and sadly I can't really watch a lot of other people's channels. Elon is giving access to internet only for Ukrainians. Well, that's a good thing. You know, if that's kind of like a statement saying he's only giving it to them, it's really kind of like because the product is new and he's still trying to trial it and test it. But it's a good thing that it actually works and it's being used in Ukraine, because anything's better than nothing, you know, and so any support of any kind is always a good thing. So moving on from that, the ruble's going to continue dropping in value as time goes on. That's true. For real, it's a joke. If you're talking about the ruble, excuse me, I'm still very tired. I still have not gotten the sleep I needed, to everyone who's wondering. No, I'm still running on empty. For real, it's a joke. If you're talking about the ruble, then yes. The reason why the U.S. doesn't want to fight Russia is that war would only last a few days before Russia is nuked and the spillover goes into all of Europe, damaging the areas for years. Well, yeah, but I think that's forgetting that Russia would also launch nukes as well, and the United States and Russia would be a nuclear wasteland for a short while. One thing, though, that we do know that is not true anymore is that we know that a nuclear winter effect is highly unlikely. We haven't actually seen enough nuclear bombs explode at a single time to know if it's true, but that theory was kind of brought up as a fear kind of thing during the Cold War, like, oh, let's not do that or we'll literally kill everyone in some kind of nuclear Holocaust winter thing. But according to modern calculations, the possibility of a nuclear winter is actually kind of low. So that being said, I don't really think that it's just a spillover into Europe that would concern America. I believe it's them getting nuked as well that would concern them. Starlink has been working in USA for a while. I haven't actually heard a lot about Starlink. The only time I've heard about it is today in Ukraine. Well, actually a few days ago in Ukraine. So that's news to me. I am for the future, and oh, dang it. Oh, man, the chat moved. Let's see here. Putin is a liberator. He's liberating old ladies of their feet and farm homes. Feet? I think he may be liberating them of their lives, if that's some kind of joke. But anyways, I try to copy all pics and vids that I see and before they are take off YouTube. I will post on your site if not seen on your stuff. Great information, keep it up. Thank you very much for the support. I'm very appreciative of all the support I get. And also, if y'all like the news that y'all are hearing right now, make sure to like the video, because the more everyone likes it, the more this news gets out to more and more people. And so if you believe this is quality news that more people should be hearing, make sure to like it so that way it will get out to more people. Also, if you're interested in getting updates here and there and being a part of the Enforcer news community, we do have a Discord, and if you'd like to join it, I'd be more than happy to have y'all all in the Discord. You can also find the maps, and you get notifications over the Discord just in case if YouTube unsubscribes you of when streams are starting. It's 10 p.m. Eastern time every night. So oil going to be higher than a Seattle tweaker. Okay, that was a very creative comment. Yes, it probably will be. It's rising in price every day, and I don't believe it'll be going down in the next few months at least. Let's see. Putin is a liberator. Oh, okay, we've already read that. Do you think the Cuban Missile Crisis was a big nothing burger? Like it was okay that the SU put missiles... Oh, that's a conversation in the chat. Stock market is supposed to open tomorrow, so rip ruble. Ooh. Yeah, you know, once the stock market opens, they're saying that the ruble is going to plummet a lot. And if that remains a true statement, and it does tomorrow, we'll be looking at the Russians funding their army with literal pennies. And maybe even the soldiers in the military won't be paid. Now, that's something I haven't actually thought about until right then. What if the Russians run out of money in the government to the point... And on top of that, there's international sanctions, so I don't believe that lending, you know, national loans to Russia is going to be a thing for most countries. And so what if they run out of money to pay soldiers? You know, soldiers will just drop arms at that point because there's no point for them to continue if they're not even getting paid. So, that being said, that would be really interesting development if that happened. Can you mark out where the bio... Oh, man, I'm sorry. I don't cover that stuff. I don't know what a biolab is. And on top of that, okay, you really think Russia's going to spend tens of thousands of... Okay, this goes into the whole big game thing. I'm going to cover it for a second. Do you really think that Russia's going to invade Ukraine for actually kind of legitimate reason of being scared that they're going to share a larger border with NATO? Not that I agree with them invading the country for that. That's entirely wrong, and I believe that the Russians should be held accountable for what they're doing. But you think that that isn't a good enough example for why they're invading? You believe that there's some kind of like hidden thing in the background where they're going for biolabs. And this is where conspiracy theorists lose me, because the actual explanation of why this is happening on the surface is good enough that you really don't have to go and try and come up with some convoluted stuff to try and come up with something, you know? I mean, like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because, you know, everyone's always talking about the circle of elites, and I say this every night at this point. What circle of elites? Like, look at all the elites that are targeting the Russian elite. And, you know, everyone's going to say, oh, well, they're not in the loop. Well, then that means there's not a group of elites that just, like, a group of global elites, because all the Russians aren't in this group of global elites. And I'm sure that the Chinese elites aren't in the world of global elites. And I'm sure that the American elites aren't in the group of British elites. Well, they may be, because the European Union and Britain, along with the United States, are really closely economically tied. So maybe there's a bit of interconnection in between Western Europe and the United States. But beyond that, I just can't see a place where this grand global conspiracy theory group just dwells and pulls all the strings in the background. I don't see that. And anyways, I'm going to get off of that because that's getting sidetracked. They invaded because Putin getting old. They're saying that he may be terminally ill, and that's something that everyone's starting to go with a lot now, and that may be true. But I don't have any information to back that up. Maybe the Ukrainians shouldn't have fired at the Russians from the nuclear plant. Well, what were they supposed to do? You know, I mean, you know, it's a war, and they were firing from the administration building. And so the Russians could have just started shooting at the administrative building, which is somewhere over here where my cursor is right now. But instead of just firing at the administration building, they decided to just start firing artillery at the whole entire reactor plant and just try and pry the Ukrainians out of their position. So it was a very goofy thing. I don't know why the Ukrainians would be blamed for defending their power plant, because it's a strategic resource, and regardless whether it's nuclear or not, the army does have a kind of like duty to defend all of the land of Ukraine. And so if they're stuck there and there's soldiers in that Inhohodar area, they must fight for the plant. That's just kind of how it works. Let's see. Imagine how many lies would go around of this this situation if there wasn't internet. Very true. Very true. Russia has vast lands. Yes, they do. It's so sad to see how those who call themselves Orthodox Christians kill themselves. They do not practice what? If China loaned Russia money, they are going to be sanctioned. That's true. They've been at war for years. 14,000 dead. Oh, okay, well, I don't know if that's a pro-Russian comment or not. Biolab stuff is... Oh, the chat's blown up again. Let me try and find it. Biolab stuff is Russia propaganda conspiracy theory. I've been praying too nonstop, Ukraine. Biolab stuff is probably a conspiracy theory thing. I don't really get behind any conspiracy theories because most of them are looking at basic things that just have basic explanations, and I'm not one who sits there and will like blindly listens to what people say in the government and stuff, but you know, like most things don't have credit. And then, you know, you have people talking about you know, humans are actually descended from aliens, you know, Mork Ork and Blork Blork, and you know, they created a son and then they had, you know, sex with an ape or something like that, and it just sounds so off base and bizarre. It's just unbelievable. I mean, like, you know, these people would probably make a greater argument for their conspiracy theories if they were actually based in fact for a bit, but most conspiracy theories just aren't based in fact at all, and they're pulling like all these wild assumptions, and with these assumptions you have to make another 100 assumptions to support them. So anyways, moving on from that, Vladimir Putin, madman. Yes, he's a madman. Let's see, what else do we have? One of the oligarchs is going to assassinate Putin. He's threatening their wealth. Follow the rubles. That's very true. I believe that the oligarchs will start to turn against him, but then again, Putin still has the upper hand over the oligarchs because he put them there, and usually someone who puts you there can put you out of there. So that being said, we're finally going to move on to the southern front, and we're going to talk about a funny video I saw in Donetsk, and it's funny just because they were the DNR rebels. But anyways, the DNR rebels got directly shot at and had to run off because the Ukrainian MLRS perfectly kind of like honed in on their position. But anyways, I'll just let you see the video.
А это работают грады. От нас или по нам? Они сейчас нам.
So it's a funny video because the translation in the comments, I can't show it to y'all, but the guy who was recording the video, he said, "Are our MLRS working?" And the guy who was answering the question said, "Yes." And he said, well, where are they? Because apparently the camera guy didn't know. And then that guy said, "They're right over there." And as soon as he pointed, the Ukrainian MLRS's missiles landed right around him, and then they started running off. It was really funny. But anyways, moving on from that, we're going to go on down to the area of Mariupol today because we have 3 separate videos that appears that the Russians are starting to put heavy pressure on the besieged defenders of Mariupol and their very heroic defense of the city, because it appears that the Ukrainians won't be able to save these defenders, yet nonetheless they fight on with dogged determination to hold the Russians as long as possible and eat up as much of their manpower and resources in this area as they possibly can for the time they have left. Anyways, we can see that the Donetsk Republic is actually involved in the encirclement. I'll show you all the video.
что-то вид у вас какой-то. Ну вот, передаю привет из Мариуполя, ну не совсем из города. Вот уже титульная надпись и самое главное стелевар. Это символ города.
So anyways, moving on from this video, that's just proof to show that the DNR troops are actually in the area. Moving on from that, we can see that there were heavy clashes in the area of Mariupol today, as the sounds of gunfire could be heard throughout the city, but I'll just show you all this one video. So, what you can get from that entire video is that the firefights sound very intense, and so going off of that, once again following up on what I've said before, due to the firefights being so intense, I'm assuming that the Russians are really starting to try and push Mariupol, because they know that the situation is going to be very bad for the defenders, and while I do like to say that the Ukrainians will win this war, I do not believe that they will win this battle. This one's starting to look really bad because there's no way for the Ukrainians to resupply this city. It's well behind enemy lines at this point. The Russians have it entirely encircled. So it's just a matter of time before this one falls. I don't know how long it will be. I can't even give an estimate on that. But however many extra hours that these defenders are able to hold this city in any way whatsoever, even if it's just a small area around the docks, if they're able to hold that, they're still tying up a large amount of Russian units that can be used elsewhere in the southern front around Crimea. So, as long as they're holding, they're doing well. And so I wish them the best of luck. And if anyone in the city of Mariupol is watching this, I hope that y'all do well and y'all defend the city for as long as possible, because the longer you hold, the more chance you give Ukraine to do something in the south that will be more beneficial to the war effort on their part. So finally, moving on, we can see drone footage, drone pictures actually, of Mariupol from the air. It's very interesting because the fields around the outside of the city are actually pot-marked, kind of like the fields in World War I once you start getting closer to no man's land. But nonetheless, it's a very interesting scene. And so I'll just let y'all soak in these pictures again and go backwards through them. It's just a very interesting sight to see a war from the air in the middle of it going on. So anyways, moving on. We'll finally be moving on to the area around Mykolaiv and Odessa, which are our last 2 points on the map, and then I'll go to answering as many questions as possible. So make sure to rev up your questions, so that way I'll have a lot of them to answer. And also, make sure to ask them, because I may actually be able to get around to them, so like to your specific questions. So make sure to ask as many questions as you would like, because I would love to answer as many as possible. Anyways, moving on from that, we can see that there's more abandoned Russian vehicles near Mykolaiv. I'll show you all the video. They appear to be BDRMs. I'm sorry, BMDs. That's a fault on my part. And one thing I'd like to note, one thing that is very crucially important, is that you can see in the Mykolaiv area, no snow has fallen or no rain has fallen to create the Rasputitsa that we're seeing in the north. And so the ground is dry around here and the tanks are actually able to move very well. And that's why you see so many of them in the field, as compared to what you see up in the northern areas, which is all these convoys are sticking to the roads as much as possible, because the ground is, you know, like a mud slush that'll eat up a tank, and so if they drive it off the road, it gets stuck in the mud. But down here in the south, we don't have that problem.
Да. Ну,
что я вам могу сказать, парни? Нехер к нам лезть. Вот все вы здесь.
So anyways, a decent amount of BMDs captured. That's a very good thing for the Ukrainians. Very bad thing for the Russians around the area of Mykolaiv, because it appears that they're not doing well around there. I'll show you this. There's been more VDV equipment lost near Mykolaiv to add on to the BMDs that were already lost earlier. As you can see here, this is some kind of artillery battalion fire direction vehicle. I don't know about these personally because I don't know about all the vehicles in the Russian military, but based off the description, this vehicle's purpose was to be closer to where the artillery's target was, and they were to report to the accuracy of the artillery fire and tell them how to adjust. As far as I know, that's what an artillery battalion fire direction vehicle would do. So it's very interesting that they've captured one, because they probably destroyed an artillery company or battalion. I'm not sure how the artillery is structured in the Russian military, but they probably destroyed their ability to spot. They probably have more vehicles than this, but even at that, they've seriously hindered that one artillery unit's ability to adjust their fire onto the target more accurately. So anyways, moving on from that, we have some more pictures from the area of Mykolaiv, and we can see that the Ukrainians have destroyed an entire artillery line near Mykolaiv. I do not know how large this unit would have been to field this many artillery pieces, but nonetheless, just take a look at the amount of artillery pieces that are in this open field. It's very wild. Maybe we can actually count them. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It looks like there's even one further behind that, so maybe 9. Maybe even a 10th one, but we'll go with 9 to have a conservative number. If someone could figure out how large a standard Russian artillery unit is, I would love to get that information, so that way we would know how big this unit was that has been apparently just wiped out and routed off their artillery pieces. And so finally, the last bit of news we have near Odessa is that we can see that the Odessans are ready. We can see a bit of their defenses here. It's not really disclosing any sort of information that the Russians don't already have, or anything that will be at a disadvantage to the Ukrainians, so I allowed this to go on. It just shows the anti-tank traps that the Odessans have laid out in the street. And so without further ado, here's the video. So I believe the Odessans will be fairly ready for anything that comes their way if the Russians are to launch a naval invasion within the coming days. So anyways, now that we've covered all this news, we're finally going to cover Zhytomyr and Vinnytsia, and once we do that, I'm going to start answering everyone's questions as best I can. So anyways, up in Zhytomyr, we can see that there was an explosion in a military base today. At the time of the posting, it was about 4.5 hours ago. Anyways, I'll try and show you all the video. It appears that some kind of missile hit that base. Don't know what kind, and I don't know where it came from, but we do know that it appeared that a missile hit that army depot and has now exploded it. So moving on from that, we have some more information from the area of Zhytomyr, which shows that 11 houses have been destroyed in a missile attack from last night. I'll show you all the video. As you can see, the damage was very extensive, and hopefully no one was inside those houses, because if they were, that's going to be terrible, terrible news for, you know, the families of those who were involved in the attacks. So anyways, moving on from that, we can see we actually got kind of like a sequence of events down here in Vinnytsia. It was all recorded. This is all one event, but it's just 3 different perspectives of it. First, we can see the cruise missile flying into Vinnytsia. We know that there was more than one, but we did see at least one of them fly in on film. I'll show you all that right now. It's just your standard caliber that they've been using ever since the beginning of the war. And then later on, we saw the missile impacts near the airport. We can see all the multiple missiles hitting that airfield. I'll show you all that right now. And then lastly, we can actually see the damage that was caused by the missiles that we saw in both of these videos in this last video here, which is the response crews looking through the damage. So as we can see, the damage was extensive. I believe that that was actually some kind of Air Force base, of course, because the Russians would not probably waste calibers on a civilian airport. I'm sure it had some kind of Ukrainian assets inside of it, and that's why they targeted the airport. And so with that, we've covered all of the developments that have happened over the past 24 hours on day 11 in Ukraine. And with that, I'm going to answer as many questions as possible. Putin promised to families of the dead soldiers $50,000. How's he going to manage that? I don't even know. I don't even know if Russia has $50,000 combined amongst all the civilians at this point with how worthless the ruble is. That's, of course, a bit of an exaggeration, but we'll have to see if that's even true. I do not believe that that would be true, considering the amount of casualties they've suffered. Russia should be the buffer zone between West and China. And I don't really know about that. You know, because like, how in the world would we achieve that? You know, so I don't really know. Let's see here. Have you seen the video of the father and son getting shot at? The father and 2 family dogs were killed. I believe I have seen that video. It was a very sad video, and I didn't really like it if you're thinking about the one I'm thinking about. Russia just turned off the nuclear plant. That's that's news to me. If they have, then that means that a large area of Ukraine is now out of power. But we'll have to see. I wouldn't really be able to gauge the effects of that immediately, because I don't know how much of the grid that one power plant powers, but considering that it's the largest one in Europe, I'm sure that it's a very large amount, and so we'll have to see the effects that that gives to the entire region over the next coming days. Let's see. I think that they are saying Putin has colon cancer. Do you think he trusts anyone to take care of that? No. I'm not really sure, though, to be honest. That would be all kind of like supposition and really just a lot of assumptions and hearsay on that, so I really can't say anything either way. They should light the forest on fire by the convoy. Maybe. Let's see. He will give them 500 gallons of... why is it that all Ukrainians are not destroying the large convoy that has been still for many days? They are trying right now. It's not without trying. They are trying to destroy the convoy, but it's a bit of a slow process because you have to wait for the right windows of opportunity for when air defenses may be lesser than normal, and then they'll try and strike. So it's not always like a definite thing. You know, so that being said, all I can say to that is they are trying. I think the end game is Russia will run out of resources and support, will broker peace with Ukraine, and Putin will just say mission complete and objectives accomplished, here's a parade. I'm kind of agreeing with that, but I don't really think Putin will be the one saying here's a parade. I believe he'll probably be fleeing the country, and there will be large civil unrest after this war is over in Russia. But who knows? That's really just my opinion. It could really go either way. It might even go the way you're saying, so who knows? If Putin leaves power, what would happen to the nuke stockpile? Oh, nothing. I mean, like, you know, it's Russia's forever. If Putin left power and someone else came to power, the nukes would just still be there. You know, they're not really tied to him. It's not really like he's directly owning the nukes or anything. They're Russia's nukes. He just happens to be the guy in charge. Let's see, what is this map from? This is a custom-made map that I've been making over the course of the past few days. I also have one that covers all of week 1's events. So if you want to find either of those, make sure to join my Discord. The link is in the description of this stream, and you can go on there, and it's under the useful links section of the Discord server. So if you want to check out the map, make sure to go there and check it out. Moving on from that, so you think Russia's soldiers... Oh, where did that go? Oh, it's gone. Dang it, there's so many chats. But I'm fine with the chats. It's just that I hate when it throws me down there and I can't see anything anymore. Long-range drones that are like DJI but military grade, we need to give them technology and firepower, of course. Yeah, we do. We need to give the Ukrainians as much firepower as we can, and we're already trying to, and we've already sent them billions of dollars in aid just for military supplies, but I believe that we can always keep on trying to support them in as many ways as possible. Hitting convoy with drones as we speak. That's good news. I believe that a lot of people are still hyped up about the 40-mile-long convoy, but I believe it's a bunch of puff and hype, even by the Russians. Because when you look at the video footage of the convoy, it really just looks like it's nothing but soft targets like logistical trucks. And so if anything, it's just tying up loads of logistical trucks that could be elsewhere, and now they're stuck on a road doing nothing. So that being said, we're going to move on. What can Ukraine hold Odessa? What are the implications if they lose it? Well, looking down here at the situation, if they lose Odessa, then Mykolaiv could be besieged on both sides really easy. The other thing is that I think the Ukrainians may be able to hold Odessa for a short while, but in the face of a large Russian naval invasion, I'm not really sure. I believe it probably fall under the same situation that Mariupol has fallen under, which is that it would be besieged for some time, but I wouldn't really know for sure. And all that's really an opinion on my point. You know, a lot of people wonder if I'm military experienced. I'm actually not. But I've gotten a lot of things right so far. So if you want to believe what I'm saying, that's fine. And if you don't, I can kind of understand. But I believe they probably try and go for a siege of Odessa, or something similar of that nature. So anyways, moving on to the next questions. Do you think at some point in due time Americans and NATO will end up having to join this fight? I'm not really sure. I can't really weigh in on that either way, to be honest. Do you realize that Russia has sent in a lot of prisoners first? Oh no. That's the prisoner conspiracy theory. No, they didn't send in prisoners. You see, Russia isn't a movie villain. They're not. It's not a video game either. Because in a video game and a movie, the evil guy always sends in the weak henchmen first, and they're killed really easy, and the protagonist goes, "Is that all you got?" And then he sends in some better people, and then they get killed eventually until the evil guy is the only one that's left. And, I guess in everyone's mind, Zelenskyy and Putin are in a movie, and Putin's throwing, like, evil henchmen at them, and they just are dumb at the beginning, but then they get smarter as they go. And Zelenskyy, at the end of the movie, is supposed to have killed them all, and then whip out a sword and put it right under Putin's neck and say, "I've won now, give it up," or something. I don't know. But everyone keeps on thinking that the Russians send in their worst people first, and that's never the case in war. You always send your best people first, with a couple of less experienced people mixed in, so that way they can get some experience, and you can try and get your military a lot more experience. But you're not going to send in completely inexperienced people with no knowledge of warfare first, because that's a very poor strategy. That's wasting a lot of equipment, a lot of money, a lot of supplies to get nowhere and just lose thousands of people for nothing. It's a very poor strategy, and it's never really been used in real life, as far as I know. So that's not what they're doing. They did not send in prisoners. I know that for sure. I know that Zelenskyy, though, actually got prisoners out of prison that had prior military service to fight for Ukraine. So I do know about that, but the Russians have not done that. And all those, and you can't tell me that like 100,000 people in the Russian army that started that initial invasion were prisoners. Like, there's just too many of them. Ukrainians fight for their lovely country. Russians fight for Vladimir Putin, the madman. This is very stupid. I can agree. And, in all caps, that's pretty emotional. But yes, I can agree that the Ukrainians actually fight to defend what they know. They fight to defend the freedom of their country, and Russia is just really fighting to fight. So in that sense, the morale is incredibly high in Ukraine, and the morale in Russia is probably somewhat low. But then again, that's an opinion on my part, because I don't actually know the stance of the Russians, because we see a lot of stuff. We see a lot of people supporting Russia, and then we see a lot of people not supporting Russia. And so maybe it's like split down the middle in Russia. Who knows? Moving on from that, we already answered that. The 5,000 Swedish Panzerscott AT rockets are now reaching the front lines. Pictures today. Oh, sweet. It's going to be like the Stingers. When they arrived on the Ukrainian front lines yesterday, we got a whole bunch of videos of them just being used, and they were shooting down a whole ton of aircraft, helicopters, and planes included. And it was just really cool to see. So I'm sure we'll start seeing a lot more videos of Russian vehicles being destroyed by Swedish Panzerskotts. Russia is lying about their military power. Yes, they are. That's entirely true. Seeing top-tier Russian jets have to fly with dumb bombs because they didn't buy enough PGMs is a huge indictment on Russian purchasing priorities. It's also a huge indictment on their logistical abilities, because you would believe that, considering that they know that this war could have gone on a little bit longer than they planned, you would think that they would at least have a supply surplus of these weapons that are not, dumb bombs, and yet they didn't. And so that's suggesting that they've just failed the logistics across the board, and they didn't really expect this to be happening the way it is. So moving on from that, At Enforcer, I'm sure. Well, Ted Bundy. I'm sure of it now. You don't understand Russia war doctrine. Ah, yes. The old send in a whole bunch of people with no military experience and let them get killed and waste a whole ton of vehicles, billions of dollars, and weeks of time and supplies we don't have, and then we'll win the war. I'm sure that's the Russian doctrine. Yeah. He's not invading Poland. NATO is beyond useless. Well, he did say in his speech that he did want to take parts of Poland and make it part of Russia again because they used to be a part of the empire. And Hitler said that too about Lebensraum for the Germans, and no one really believed him. And they said, oh, that's useless, you know, that doesn't make any sense. And then he went and did it. So I don't know. Maybe Putin is going crazy, which I would highly suspect at this point. And maybe that's what he'll be doing in the future, is maybe trying to vie for Polish land and maybe start Polish proxy wars, you know, where like rebels pop up in the areas that used to be controlled by the Russian Empire. I thought most of the Russian military were conscripted. Did they send in the conscripts first and then the main army as a probe attack? Most of the Russian army is conscripts. They have like almost no professional soldiers that just serve there as a career. Like the Russian army is set up where in between the ages of 18 and I believe 30 or somewhere around there, you have to serve in the army at least 1 year. And so they go in, they get like little training, and then they serve for a year. And that's what most of the Russian army is. It's just these guys serving for like 1 year. And so that being said, there's not like a good army out there. I mean, like the invasion force that they've set up along Ukraine is almost the entire size of the Russian army, because they have 285,000 soldiers in active service right now. Those are the conscripts included. And they currently are using around 210,000 troops in Ukraine. And so that's most of their army. And so there's really nothing left for them to pull on. You know, they've already brought in the best equipment, and it's already been fighting there for days. And last week's map, we saw tons of T-90As, T-80s, T-80 BVMs, T-80 BVMs. I think I said BVMs twice, but BV and BVMs. We've seen tons of those get destroyed. We've seen Mi-35s, Mi-28s. We've seen the best of the Russian Air Force that they actually field. I'm not talking about like the T-14 Armadas and the Su-57 level stuff that isn't really used. I'm talking about the actual stuff the Russian army fields in number. So that being said, I don't think that the Russians are doing well at all, even when you consider that they may have sent in conscripts first and then the better army, like the actual proper army second. I just don't think that's worked out. Convoys are waiting for a turkey shoot. Add F-16s to Ukraine Air Force. Yeah, they've been talking about A-10s a lot. A lot of people have been joking about giving Ukraine a whole bunch of aircraft and just letting them burn up the convoy with them. Maybe it'll happen in the future. Who knows? Convoy is just a distraction. Russians are coming from other roads. Poland planes will drag everyone into the war. Turkey blocking the Black Sea, close to Odessa. Save the children. After all that, just save the children. Well, I guess. Well, I mean, like, save the children, of course, but the rest of it, I guess. Isn't the Cold War, isn't the cold another point for the Russians? There's still corona and other stuff that you can get when you have that many. I mean, like, I don't really think disease is really, like, the main, like, thoughts of the Russian military. Like, oh, they might get COVID. I mean, no one's really thinking about that right now. There's a whole war going on, and diseases just happen. Like, they happen beforehand. They've always been happening, and so, it's not really like a primary concern of either army. It's kind of like a secondary concern that I'm sure is just understood, but they're not really, like, making that, like, their primary concern of thinking about things. Oh yeah, it is taking much longer than expected as well, Dude Nukem. Because Putin equals Stalin, am I right? I mean, like, they're very similar, really. The only difference is, Putin isn't sending people to death camps. That's the only difference. It was on the news about them sending prisoners, and I didn't say they were all prisoners. What news? Because if you're talking about Fox News, who brought on a professional basketball player this morning to talk about war crimes, I usually accredit a lot of the things they say to nothing more than puffery, because they do such silly things. But all the mainstream news does. I'm not just talking about Fox. I'm talking about Fox, CNN, MSNBC, all those. They do such silly things that I got to discredit a decent amount of what they say. So, that being said, while you may have seen it on the news and that may have some credibility, they do say a lot of stuff that really isn't true. Morley, do you think it was okay for Ukraine to cut off power and water to Crimeans who were taken over by Russians if they claimed they are countrymen. Why make it hard for 2.2 million people? I don't really know about the situation with that in Ukraine. I mean, like, really, to be honest, why in the world would they supply a power grid of a hostile nation with power, even if there are Ukrainians in there? It's now controlled by the Russians, and if you provide that with power, you're just easing the load on the Russians for providing for Crimea. And so it really wasn't about making the Ukrainians suffer. It was really about making the Russians carry their own weight in the Crimean peninsula, I guess you could say. That's probably how I would look at it if I actually looked into that situation a little bit more. Putin will eventually attack NATO. I can kind of agree with that. I think that may happen within years' time. It looks to me like Russia's ascension in 2014 enabled them to take the south. Without Crimea and Donbass, they could have not contemplated to invade. I mean, maybe not. Who knows? That's a pretty good point. But I'm not really sure if they were necessary for invasion, because if they had removed Crimea from the equation and this area didn't have this bridge built in between it, which they've just built within a few years ago, they actually could have focused their attack entirely on mainland Ukraine, which I believe may have been actually more beneficial for the Russian battle doctrine. Like, if they just actually focused on Sumy, Kharkiv, and the areas of Donetsk and Luhansk, and pushing out of those and towards Mariupol and then up towards Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro, and then start shooting inwards through the country, I believe they would have had a lot more success than, like, four separate fronts. Yeah, because this Donetsk and Luhansk area, although they're now connected, is still kind of a separate front. And they have 4 separate fronts going on right now, and really the best thing to do in a war is to have as few fronts as possible when fighting, because all these fronts have to be supported with different logistical chains and different supplies, and you have to sort all that stuff out, and it gets incredibly complicated, and the more complicated things get, the harder they get to do. And so you want to make this as easy as possible in 2 fronts, one to Kharkiv, one to Donetsk and Luhansk, one through it, or something like that. Would have been much more efficient than what they did here with 4 separate fronts going for 4 separate objectives, or multiple objectives at the same time on the same front. So moving on from that, I'm going to answer a few more questions, and then we'll end the stream. I think this is taking too seriously because it's white people involved. I mean, what happened in the war in Africa and Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan? No, it's not that white people are involved. It's that Ukraine actually has an economy, and it's in Europe, you know, which is one of the largest economies in the world. So destabilizing one of the most prosperous and wealthiest places on Earth isn't really about it being a racial thing. I don't know why everything's got to become a racial thing. It's more about the economic side of things and what this could lead to, because here's the thing. If a war happens in Africa or in the Middle East, there's no nuclear weapons involved, and you're not talking about major world players, you know, in terms of countries. And so you're not looking at nuclear onslaught if Egypt and Sudan decide to duke it out for a bit. But if you're talking about Europe and Russia getting in a standoff, the whole entire world could be nuked. And so the stakes are much higher in every regard, economically, you know, politically, diplomatically, nuclear-wise. Everything is that much more ramped up. And so this is why this is being heavily talked about, is because unlike in less developed countries where wars can happen and nothing really comes out of them, in the, you know, European area, a war means something big, you know. So that being said, you know, that was kind of a simple explanation. A little simple because I'm very tired, and I'm sorry about that once again, y'all. First man gets the AK-47. Yeah, that's an old enemy at the gates joke. Let's see. It was on the news. Okay, we've already read that. Russia takes big hit Kharkiv. Kharkiv just happened. I don't know what that means, but if you could explain that more, I'd love to talk about it if it's something that just happened. Russian economy drops and they have no more money to service them? What? I don't know. 20k troops coming in. How would you use them? Will they be effective? I don't really talk about exact military strategy because I don't even know the layout of where the Ukrainian troops are, because I don't, number one, disclose those locations, and number two, almost no one else discloses their location. So I don't really know what the Ukrainian side of the fighting looks like, and I really can't say where Russian units are in particular because I don't get enough information on that either. I just get information on the incidents and events that happened around the country. But that being said, I would have to really know the tactical situation to know where 20,000 men would be best suited to be used. So that being said, I'm going to move on from that. Thank you for the question, though. It was a great question. Unfortunately, I don't have enough information to answer it. Let's see. Putin wants a Moldova, Ukraine, and land bridge to Kaliningrad. I believe, yes, I believe that may be true. That may be what he's aiming for here. So moving on from that. Is Putin negotiating U.S. nuclear deal with Iran? I don't know. I haven't really been keeping up on that, you see, because I'm doing a law school entrance exam. I've said this many times, and I'm sorry to everyone who's heard this a lot, but I'm doing law school entrance exams right now. I'm a full-time college student, and on top of all that, these streams take hours to put together the news for, and so I don't really have a lot of time to, like, focus on other countries' politics as well. So sadly, I couldn't really talk about that too much. Let's see. Recruiting Syrians for urban combat within last half hour? What? I don't know about that. I have to look into that. Russian, let's see, we've already read that. Yeah, not cool to give away Ukrainian military positions to their enemy. Very true. That's also why I don't do it on stream, and that's why they're very smart for not releasing that info, because if they did, it could mean a whole bunch of bad stuff for the Ukrainians, because then the Russians would maybe have more informed positions, and then they could make more informed battle plans, which would be to a detriment to the Ukrainians, who are already at a disadvantage. I mean, I know that I say they'll win this war, and they probably will, but they're still at a disadvantage number-wise, even if the Russian army is only 280,000 active members at this point, and about 90% of the invasion force is in the country, around 200,000 troops or so. They're still at a disadvantage. So it wouldn't be a good idea to disclose military location, well, forces and their locations. Ukrainian forces ambushed and eliminated a large Russian convoy in Kharkiv Oblast today. Yes, I believe I covered that. It was like 30 vehicles or so. It's a really large amount. Moving on from that, what we got? What makes Russia lose in Afghanistan is a long journey, but what will happen here? Oh, dang it, there it went. It's gone. Well, what would happen here is very similar. Well, it wouldn't be similar to Afghanistan, because Afghanistan had the Mujahideen, which kind of has a different way of fighting, because number one, they were never organized from the start. Unlike the Ukrainian government, that's an official government. So I don't really think the situations are comparable, but supply line wise, they are. That's like the only thing they're comparable in. And the Russians are going to start getting pounded supply line wise, and that's really going to start making them hurt in the coming days. They're already hurting. They're already having to get civilian vehicles in to try and make up at least for the deficits of lost logistics vehicles. But once attacks on the logistical convoys become more efficient and they're ramped up, and you start seeing civilians taking on partisan roles and attacking the trucks themselves, like we've seen sometimes, it's really going to start hurting them a lot. And the logistical situation will be a lot like Afghanistan, where they'll either have to start flying in supplies by helicopter, and then those will get shot down because, they have stingers everywhere, and then the supply situation is just shot, and they won't be able to do anything much. Moving on from that. Stop making, oh yeah, I've seen that. Thank you very much for saying that. I try and make things as least American political as possible on this channel, because one, I'll get into that later. There's no point in covering that now. Amazing information. Thank you, Enforcer. No problem at all, Pavel. I'm glad that I can give you some information. I'm sure you've got a lot of it already over there, but if I can give you any extra, it's good to know that I can. Just about 2 or 3 more questions I'll try and get to, and then the stream will end tonight, because I am very tired. So if Syrians are coming to fight, they could die too. Not like they know their urban terrain better than the homeboys. That's true. Let's see. Oh boy. Let's try and like keep the racial chat to a minimum, because it really has nothing to do with Ukraine. So let's try and keep that out of the chat, guys. Would a new front by Belarus make any difference at this point? Looks like Russia is screwed no matter what. Belarus can only dedicate about 40,000 troops to this. Their army is only like the Belarusian army. I'm not talking about the Belarusian armed forces, but the army is only like 70,000 strong. And I believe they double down as a police force as well. So they could probably only send like 30 to 40,000 troops. And they're not going to send them out here, because 30 to 40,000 troops across a front this large, or even a front that was really small, like over here near Koval, it just wouldn't do anything. So it'd probably just be added into the rest of the invasion force on the Russian front lines that are already around, like around Kiev and Chernihiv. But I couldn't actually see them making a discernible difference. The Chechens sent more soldiers in than the Belarusian army has in its size, so that says a lot to what Belarus could actually add to this war. Should do what Russia does and send some drones to any ammo dumps they set with thermite. I don't know. That question was kind of jarbled. I'm sorry about that. What kind of law do you want to practice? Business? Criminal? How about civil? I want to be a defense attorney. Defense attorneys get paid pretty well, and it's very interesting stuff. So I'm actually wanting to become a civil attorney of sorts, and kind of practice any kind of law. But anyways, moving on from that. Do you think USA is in violation of the Budapest Agreement by not intervening in 2014 or again now? Also, do you think Russia would launch nukes if the US got involved if we never hit home? Yes, they would launch nukes if we got involved. They keep on making that very clear, and it would lead to a nuclear onslaught between both sides. And the US is, I don't really know. I think the Budapest Agreement is talking about the 1994 agreement where Ukraine gave up their nukes and in return for guarantees of their sovereignty and independence. They are in violation of that, if that's the Budapest Agreement. I know it as the Nuclear Treaty of 1994, so the names may be different, but if that's the same thing, then yes, I believe we're in violation of it. U.S. buys oil from Russia? Yes, they do. They actually buy a large amount of it. We know the vote in Crimea was 95% to join Russia. You claim things, but where are the receipts? LOL. Okay. That apparently was a chat in the, that was like a response to someone in the chat. Yes, Enforcer, get some rest. Everyone keeps telling me that, but there's just no way for me to get rest, you see. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day, and I work on everything I have to work on all day long, and I take like a 30-minute break for lunch, take another 30-minute break for supper, and then I work on everything, and then do the stream until about 11:10, and then I get off and I do kind of like a recap with my mods, and we talk about stuff, and then I finally go to bed around 12:30, and I wake up and do this all over again. So I'm very tired, but I'm going to keep doing this until the war's over. Nothing is going to stop me from sitting here and trying to report the best information I can about this war. So hopefully y'all appreciate my decision to be exhausted, because I am very exhausted at this point. Why does the Western media think that Russia has such an advantage over Ukraine, even though Ukraine has the numbers? Ukraine doesn't have the numbers over Russia, but they do have the numbers to hold a very stiff resistance. And one thing that the West keeps on overhyping is that they keep on overhyping Russia because everyone's still stuck in that mindset of it being a Soviet republic and actually being able to support their military with funding. Because let's say this, let's pull up this question. How much does it cost to maintain a main battle tank? Let's see. How much does a tank cost to maintain? Okay, that's apparently a fish tank, so we know it's not that kind of tank. How much does a military tank... How often do tanks need maintenance? Oh, that's talking about water tanks again. Let's see. According to the military plans to spend on preparation... Oh, that's T-34s for parade. Maybe it's on here. Let's check. Let's get rid of that. Depending on the nation and vehicle in question, let's see if we can get an actual number through here. Golly, like, this is a lot of stuff and, like, no actual number on the maintenance. Can we get, like, a number in dollars? Maybe? Okay, so there's no numbers. This guy, like, talks about, life cycle engines cost to drop from, well, yeah, but what about, like, a single tank, so that we can just calculate the numbers up from there? Oh, gee, man, they're not giving me a number. See, so Russia on paper's got 13,000 T-72s, T-80s, T-90s. But let me do some math here real quick, and let's figure this out. Let's say that maintaining a tank, because military equipment is usually expensive to maintain because the parts are not really interchangeable with a car. They had to be custom made, you know, all that stuff. And obviously they can't be interchanged with the car. But let's say that the maintenance of a single tank is like, let's go with a very, like, conservative number and say it's $50,000 per year per tank. And let's say they just maintain the main battle tanks alone and they got 13,000 of them. That's $650 million a year in tank repairs alone. And I feel like that's a really low number, and I can't get an official number on how much it costs to maintain a tank. Maybe we can get a breakdown. How much does it cost to run an M1 Abrams? I know the M1 Abrams is probably going to be a lot more expensive per year. So we'll divide the number in half if we can get one. Tank would cost $1,200 per year or less to operate and support. Then, well, yeah, but how much does it cost? I just need to know how much it costs on its base, like, face value. Oh, this is a 16-page report. Hang on, y'all. I know this is kind of, like, digging deep here, but I want to actually find out how much this would cost. Results in brief. So, let's see. Let's see, the army, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Oh, yes, we finally got the costs. Constant 1976 dollars in thousands. Okay, so this was 1976 dollars. So let's get a currency inflation calculator. And let's put in, if in 1976, and let's figure out the total cost. Okay, so crew. Okay, we're gonna go. Oh, it's on the XM1. Oh my god, it's on the XM1. Okay. Can't use the XM1. We're actually looking for figures on an M1, and you know. Oh wait a minute. I'm sorry. It actually says it's now the M1. So apparently this isn't like the very early versions of the XM1. This is like the XM1 that they just pretty much went into serial production with. So 44.5 plus 26 plus 12.5 plus 37.9 plus 1.9 plus 19.2 plus 1.2 plus... Oh, wait a minute, the total's at the bottom. Oh my god. $161,200. So let's put that in. $161,200,000. Let's calculate. So nowadays, the maintenance of a single M1 Abrams tank, and this is the 105mm M1 Abrams, like the earliest version of it, is almost $800,000. And so let's just say that a Russian tank is half that price, okay? And let's say it's like 400,000. So 400,000 times 13,000 tanks. Oh, damn, that number's so big. It's $5.2 billion a year just to maintain the tanks. And how big is Russia's military budget? Russian military... No, let's put in the Russian army budget, because that would be more specific. Russian army budget. Oh, I know the army's not getting all the funding. That's the Russian armed forces. Can we get, like, a breakdown on, like, what branch got what? Oh, gee, it doesn't tell me. That's a bummer, because I like to know, like, what the army actually... What is Russia's military budget? Oh, man, it's not going to give me an answer. Well, that's unfortunate. But let's say out of that, okay, because we know that it costs $5.2 billion. The Air Force is probably getting a decent amount of that funding. The Army is probably getting $12 billion, maybe. Oh no, we'll up that up to like $15 billion just cause. I don't really have any reason to do that, but we'll just say just cause. So to maintain all their tanks at half the cost of an M1 Abrams, and it may even be closer, higher up to the total cost of an M1 Abrams, would cost $5.2 billion. So the Russians would be eating up 33% of their national budget for the army, like the Russian ground forces alone, just maintaining their tanks. And we all know that's not possible. There's a whole lot of other stuff you have to do in the army. You have to pay the soldiers. You have to provide for every other vehicle in the army. You have to maintain the bases. There's a million other expenditures. You have to put money into research and development of new vehicles, equipment, technology, all that stuff. It's just impossible. There's no way they're maintaining all those vehicles on such a, like, shoestring budget, if you know what I'm saying. So I don't believe that's possible. I'll answer a few more questions since I kind of went on that. Thanks for another great stream. No problem at all. We're going to scroll down. Oh, the chat is running. Let's see. It does not add cost of ammunition. You cannot compare American cost to Russian cost to do this. Well, you see, the budget here is in billions of dollars. And I kind of can, you know, although I don't really have a close, like, estimate for it. We can try and get a general idea of it, although that was really loose math. So yeah, I can kind of see what you're saying. Quantified operational costs for the combat systems in the current ATC baseline, including 60 Abrams, 66,735 cents per mile. I guess you're saying for all that. You cannot compare. It does not add cost of ammunition. The war will be over by the time you calculate this. True. I'm sorry about this, y'all. I mean, like, I do that off stream. I did that for the logistics side of things on this map here. But I was just seeing if I could run through some stuff on the numbers. Sounds about right, give or take. Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of legit. I mean, like, we really don't have a lot of information to back up what I was doing there, but we can kind of see that it would be unfeasible, even if Russian tanks were half the price to maintain. A trillion of today's rubles. Yeah, you know, they're probably maintaining the Russian army now on a budget of Robux these days because it's worth more than a ruble. The Russian convoys are also suffering from failure from cheap-ass Chinese tires. I've heard that so much, and it's true. And that's the craziest thing about it, is that something as small as tires are just screwing the Russian army over. It's a ridiculous calculation. I can agree, but it was just to try and get a close approximation. Day 12, Ukrainian stand up, Vladimir Putin down. I can agree with that. 21 million rubles. Interesting. Let's see. Military, 69 billion military spending last year. Nice, by the way. Bro, that's not maintenance cost. Yeah, I know it wasn't maintenance cost. We're just trying to get like an approximate price for how much these things cost to run. And they are going to buy ammunition for them throughout the year. You got to remember that, because they are going to be training these crews on how to operate these tanks, and every once in a while that involves live firing exercises. And so ammunition will have to be bought for these vehicles eventually for them to train on. Although I think like the Russians train on like a third the amount of ammunition per year that American tankers train on. But anyways, that being said, it's a time to end the stream because it's pretty late. This has been going on for 2 hours. And so I thank y'all so much for coming. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everyone's comments as usual. There's a lot of them. And, you know, it's a long stream as is. And, you know, we could keep going all day because everyone would just keep on joining and asking questions. But I love it so much that y'all are so interested in what's going on. And I'm very happy to provide as accurate information of news as I can. So if you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe. Also make sure to like the videos. It really helps them out in the algorithm, and it gets a lot more people to this news. So if you think it's high quality news, help out other people and like this. There's charitable causes, a link for that in the description below, so you can help out the Ukrainian war effort in any way you want. There's multiple ways to do that. Just go to the link below. Also join the Discord server if you'd like. I have a Discord server. I'm trying to build up a community of people who are very interested in this channel and the news I deliver. So if you'd like to be a little bit more involved, although I'm really busy, please join the Discord, and I'll try and get around to talking to everyone when I can. But anyways, I thank y'all all so much, and I hope y'all have a great night. Thank you very much. The stream will come on again at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Thank you once again, and good night.